open it. So you just mail it to me.
I'll just do that in a minute. Let me just do it. Yeah.
The Palladian House, Barwaha.
So ask me questions, and I'm sure for those of you who have access to the internet, you can maybe Google some of the visitors you've had, and you can get a sense of what they have been doing, and how you can reach them. I'm sure there are other ways in which you can also communicate, right? That is the idea. So please feel free, and Richa, this is something, if you want to share my email with students, that's fine as well. So get in touch, and we can continue some of this conversation that we'll have today. So basically, while we're setting this PowerPoint, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I teach and research on international relations, right? Now, it's a very big field. Some of you will, perhaps take it up in your undergraduate. You will do your master's. Some of you will go abroad. But this is a very important discipline within the social sciences. And this is taught in many universities in India, also abroad, right? Many universities in America, Australia, England, even non-Anglophone countries like Sweden, they all teach international relations. You can also call it international politics. You can call it, a part of political science. So there are different ways in which it is known. And there are a few universities in India that also teach that, right? So when I say international relations, right, while we're trying to sort this out, tell me, I'm sure, like, just raise your hands. What do you understand by international relations? Yes. Whoa, brilliant. Thank you. Tell me your name as well. Nakul, thank you so much. Globalization, yes. Your friend in front, yes. Absolutely. Relations between countries. Throw your name at me. Jay, right? Thank you so much. Brilliant. Anybody else? I did see a few more. Yes, at the back there, yes. Trade, and then what did you say? Commerce. Okay, brilliant. Yes, trade, commerce. Yes, and tell me your name. Okay, thank you. Again? Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Nihat. Yes, please. Peace and development. Thank you so much, my dear. That is the area of research that is what I teach as well. So definitely peace and development, because obviously the world is so full of wars right now. Tell me your name. Aradhya. Aradhya, beautiful name. Thank you. Yes, one more hand there. Yes. Yes, 2 and more countries. Absolutely. That is international relations. Thank you. Your name? Okay, thank you so much. And anybody else? Yes, one more. Yes.
Hello. Better understanding and helping each other between countries.
Okay, healthy understanding between countries. Okay, that's excellent. So most of you are, tell me your name again.
Mudit Solanki.
Mudit, thank you so much. Yes, one more here. I'm still waiting for the PowerPoint to get fixed, so this is fine. Yes. 1 second. There's one at the back, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
Brotherhood between two countries.
Okay, basically good relations between the two countries, right? We can also call it sisterhood, right? I teach gender as well, but thank you. Tell me your name. Rishika, okay, thank you, yes. And your turn now, sir.
Relations between two countries for security and many purposes.
Oh, wow, thank you. That is brilliant. And your name is?
Rishikesh Tiwari.
Rishikesh. And you talked about security, right? Which is so important in this world. It's the core subject of international relations. So thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, so what the sense that I get is you already know about international relations. It's not a new subject. It's not something that you haven't heard of. And I also hope that many of you are reading newspapers, right? Or getting access to some news media through which you get a sense of what is happening in the world, right? So what are the more important things happening in the world right now? What is it that you think is so urgent, that you read about, that you want to understand, that is something you're concerned about? Yes, here in the second row. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that is absolutely getting a lot of attention. Thank you for that. Your name? Yati. Thank you so much. Yes. Canada and India right now, absolutely, and also extended to the US, right? Yeah, thank you. You also answered in the first round. Great, thank you. Anybody else? What is it that you're concerned about right now? This is very much part of the presentation that I have in mind. So while they're setting it up, let me hear some more thoughts on, yes, there is one hand there. Yes, yes, yes.
Russia-Ukraine war.
Russia-Ukraine war, before the Middle East war, that was the big war for the last 1 year. And I live in Sweden, and the war is right next door, because Sweden and Finland, they share that same region, right? And one thing that has happened because of the war is that my plane now comes, I take Finnair, so I fly from Helsinki to Delhi. And earlier, it used to go via the Russian airspace, and now they avoid it because they take the longer route. So these wars affect all of us in a way, right? Thank you. Tell me your name.
Ridaika.
Vedaika.
Ridaika.
Ridaika. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay, one more and then we'll stop there. G20, yes, and it happened in India, right? And what happened? What did you think of it?
It is for the better relationship between the countries like Germany, India, and telling about India's more development in technology fields and common.
Yeah, so it's basically interactions, exchanges between powerful countries of the world, right? And how they're going to manage the economy, how they will also work with other countries. One significant development that happened in the G20 was the joining of African Union. You know, they joined G20, and it's a big moment because that divide between the rich countries and the poor countries has suddenly lessened, right? Thank you. Your name again? Jay, yes, I remember now, Jay. Okay, so we have a lot of answers from you all, and I think that that sets pretty much the pace of things that I want to share today. There is a lot that is happening in the world, right? So much. And everything that happens is also something that connects us to the wider world. Although we are located here, you know, the biggest city near is Indore. We are located in this region of Madhya Pradesh, part of India. In this small city, small, relatively small, right? If you think of smaller cities in Sweden, we are very, very big here. So even though we are in this part of the world, we are connected to the larger world outside, right? Because we are consuming news, because so many things that we do, say, live, travel, is to do with the world, right? What we want to study, where we want to go, those are the choices that some of you will be making in a few years. You know, you may want to go abroad, you may want to avail of scholarships, you may have specific interest areas. Some of you may want to do natural sciences, engineering, medicine. Some of you will want to do humanities, social sciences, right? So of course the world is interconnected in many ways, and in some sense we are all global citizens, right? We are proud citizens of our country, but we are also global citizens, and this is a term that you must have learned about or used, right? So that's fantastic. We also now have the PowerPoint. Yeah, can I? Yeah, I can. Okay, that's great. Yeah. Take it. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, and it's clear, loud? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to navigate the PowerPoint as well. So just, what's called full, oh, from here, okay, that's great. Okay, right, we get this started. And, okay, now you can hear and see everything, so I'm happy with this. So yes, we are all interconnected in so many ways, right? Because not just in terms of what we are reading about, the media that we access, the stories that we read about, the news that you read, you all want to go abroad, you all want to, you know, you have connections, you have relatives outside probably, or friends that you hear of. It's not the age when, you know, in our times we used to write letters, pen friends we used to have, right? And those letters used to go back and forth. We used to collect stamps to know about the international. Little lower. Yeah, that's, yeah. So, yeah, can you, yeah, I forget that I'm not speaking through that. See, technology, we are all technophobes, some of us. So just so you know that we are interconnected in so many ways, right? Even what you wear, right? Next time, check the labels of clothes that you wear. Many of those will say made in Indonesia, made in Bangladesh. कभी check करना. और मॉल्स में जाते हो, कहीं भी जाते हो, कोई चीज़, कोई प्रोडक्ट लेते हो, उसको ज़रूर देखो कि कहाँ बना है, right? And we know that that also tells you, and it's amazing, right? Something that was made, manufactured in Bangladesh or Indonesia, travels all the way to India. And this is a question that we have, कि आखिर क्या बात है? कि, you know, we are such a large country, how is it that we manage to, you know, get something from that part of the world? How does it travel to us? How are things imported, exported, right? Who makes decisions about war and peace, right? We often have, you know, clashes in Kashmir, for example, terrorist attacks, and then the army, and then we hear of deaths of soldiers. So much is happening, right? So how are we interconnected in that sense, right? So international relations, why and how we should understand the world, right? So let's talk a little bit today with your help. What is IR, what is not IR, right? And how should we understand the world around us, right? Because there are ways in which we also need to get a sense of the world. There's one thing to say that the world is complex, there is war, there is peace. How should we understand it, right? How should we talk about it? There's one way in which the media talks, and you've had journalists coming and talking to you, right? And that would have been interesting. They have, if you put a journalist and me together, I'm an academic. I'm teaching at the university, I research, I write books. A journalist and I will have completely different views of the same thing, right? So how do we understand conflicts and, you know, other things that we study about, right? And some basics, right? So what is IR, what is not IR? So you told me a lot of things about what is IR, right? What is not IR? If I ask you that question, what do you think is not IR? Can anyone reflect on that? I just want a couple of responses. Yes. The war of Russia is not IR. You think it is not international relations? World War II is not international relations. But it is, because it concerns, you know, the whole world in a way, right? It affected the whole world. So, and the war in Ukraine and Russia affects what oil we import, right? Our relations with Russia. So in some sense, we are connected, right? So that is perhaps not the right answer. Tell me your name. Mokshita. Okay, beautiful name, yes. Yeah. Yes. Pakistan's, okay, poor economy, right? You think that is not IR. But that is international relations, because it has got to do with the fact that how did the economy become so bad? They have been investing in war. They have been dependent on America, right? So they are also interconnected, right? So tell me your name. Manas. Manas, right? Thanks. One more. No, I think you've answered. So I want somebody else. One, yeah, did you answer in the first round? You did, right? So just wait. Anyone else? No, okay, all right. All right, no, first him, yes. Yeah. Not international relations. Great point. So what you're arguing is that what happens within a country, so what happens between, say, neighboring states of Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, that is not international relations. But it is, and that's what we're going to pick up today, because what happens here affects the politics, affects the national politics of India, and that in turn affects what happens in the world. Why do you think the BBC was reporting about elections in the states, in the 4 states of India? Why was BBC interested, right? Because it's a big country, and what happens in these 4 states is going to affect perhaps. What we're trying to say here is everything that we study, read, understand, think about is international relations. International relations is not something which is out there. वो बाहर कोई ऐसी चीज़ नहीं है कि बस डिप्लोमेसी वाले, फॉरेन पॉलिसी वाले, जो सिविल सर्वेंट्स बात करते हैं, वो डिप्लोमैट्स बात करते हैं, फॉरेन पॉलिसी बनती है, दैट इज़ इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस. बिल्कुल नहीं. इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संबंध, वो चीज़ है जो हम एवरीडे लाइफ में जीते हैं, राइट? कपड़ों से लेकर के, एजुकेशन से लेकर के, food is so important. Have you asked yourself the food that you eat, where is it manufactured, right? कहाँ से आ रही है? Who is growing them? Who are the farmers? How is it processed? What are we exporting and importing? I live in Sweden, right? I don't have access to so many things that you do. I get really crazy when I see vegetables in India. And I don't find any of that there. And then I wonder if I find क्या बोलते हैं, घिया बोलते हैं, लौकी बोलते हैं यहाँ पे, लौकी. अब लौकी देख के मुझे इतनी खुशी होती है कि अरे लौकी मिला स्वीडन में, इतने ठंडे देश में, कहाँ से आया? इंडिया से जाता है यूके से घूम के आता है स्वीडन में डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होने. So you see how things travel? It's fascinating what the world is going through right now and how it has all transformed. I have listed these things for you and I will circulate the PowerPoint. इसमें बहुत सारी लिस्टिंग की है मैंने. कोविड हो, वॉर इन यूक्रेन हो, फैमिन्स हो, कई देशों में जो बोलते हैं अनाज की कमी है, राइट? There are famines, people are dying of starvation, right? Global warming, food scarcity. There's so much that is going on. Refugees. It's a huge crisis in Europe, right? In India also we have occasionally these flare-ups about refugees coming in. Should countries allow people from outside to come in? All of this is international relations, right? And so I want you to think about it. Next time you think about any issue and think about its international implications, right? And how is it international relations? Okay, so international relations is a body of thought, right? That attempts to understand and explain the dynamics of world politics. So there are a lot of frameworks within international relations. I'm sure that all the other speakers from their different positions, from their different fields would have told you that this is how, for example, you study journalism, right? This is the ethics of journalism. This is how you understand, the biases of the media or who funds the media, right? There are different perspectives. IR also has different perspectives, right? And we try to get some of this. So what happens is any news that you see, right? What international relations teaches you is to go deep into that news and find out what's really going on. And that you can't do by depending on social media alone. You can't do by just depending on just even the media. You have to do more research, you have to read more books, you have to understand some of the frameworks, right? And you have to also understand your biases, right? We are all biased as well. If somebody tells you I'm not biased, that doesn't happen. We are all biased because हम सब अपने पर्सपेक्टिव से आते हैं, राइट? हमको लगता है कि ऐसी है, दुनिया ऐसी है, the way I think. So we all bring our baggage as well. ये बहुत बड़ी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है सोशल साइंस की, राइट? जिसको हम समाज शास्त्र बोलते हैं. And I hope that all of you are working on your language skills as well. क्योंकि सिर्फ इंग्लिश जानना जरूरी नहीं है. इंग्लिश आप सभी अच्छा बोलेंगे, हिंदी भी अच्छा बोलना चाहिए और आपकी जो मातृभाषा है उसको भी आपको सीखनी चाहिए, राइट? और अच्छी शुद्ध भाषा बोलिए, कोशिश करते रहिए. I'm still trying to learn Swedish. मेरे लिए मजबूरी है, but I'm still trying to pick it up, right? So language skills are important. Coming back to that, to get behind all the different kinds of events that happen which are reported, उसके पीछे जाके उसके inquiry कीजिए. आप कुछ भी पढ़ते हैं. Try and understand what's actually going on. Why is it that Gaza is at war with Israel? What's actually happening? So don't just depend on sensational reporting in the press. Indian press is not even equipped to answer it because people have not been there for a long time. We have not followed that conflict, right? I was there in Israel. I was supposed to go there and teach a class, a course that I had created, and I was there in June with the students. Two of my students who I taught, or who I interacted with rather, they went. Israel has conscription. Every student above the age of 18 has to go and fight for 3 years and 2 years. I think it's 2 years for women and 3 years for men. And many of the young soldiers have died in the war as well. And of course, a number of deaths in Gaza as well. So think about that, how things affect us, right? So talking about media, there was one story here, Britain and France at war with Germany. This is, of course, from the World War time, right, when Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Britain. But this is another news item which is very interesting. Which is from the time that Edmund Hillary climbed the Everest, right? Remember Edmund Hillary? He died some years ago. I don't know if you, perhaps this is like what we used to say, general knowledge. Everest पे कौन पहले गया था? I'm sure that you all learned that there was a New Zealander, but was he alone? Was he alone? Did Edmund Hillary go climb the Everest alone? Can anybody give me the right answer? What actually happened? Yes, of course. बिल्कुल सही. Thank you very much. अपना परिचय दीजिए, please. Thank you so much. बिल्कुल सही कहा आपने, and that is what I wanted to show you. ये news देखो, सब ध्यान से देखो. This is from Auckland Star, right? It says New Zealander climbs Everest. That is the main headline. But as your sir here pointed out, if you go to Nepal and if you want to do mountaineering, you cannot do so without the Sherpa tribes. They are the ones trained in mountaineering. तो उनके बिना आप जा ही नहीं सकते हैं एवरेस्ट पे. आपको वो आपको सिखाते हैं, आपके साथ जाते हैं, right? And in this case, there were the two of them. So we still don't know Tenzing Norgay was the first guy or not, because his history, his story has been wiped out, right? There is one person's story that we are constantly told, that it was Tenzing Norgay is nowhere in the picture. A little bit you see at the bottom there, but it was Edmund Hillary with a porter. Porter is somebody who carries your things, right? So look at the way they described Tenzing Norgay, right? Sir even remembered his name, right? Some of us remember that name, but for this newspaper, they are too embarrassed to talk about his achievements, name, so they call him with the porter. I mean, see how unequally it is being reported. Can you see the media bias here? Can you see how problematic it is that the white man's perspective, achievement is highlighted, and there is this person from Nepal, from the global south, from a third world country that is not recognized. And international relations recognizes that these kinds of inequalities exist, right? Okay, so as a discipline, and I don't have to go through a lot of all of this. I will, as I said, leave the PowerPoint with you, and I want you to ask me more questions rather. But the discipline itself, right, originated in between the war, after the First World War and the Second World War, in Europe, in Britain, at the University of Aberystwyth in Wales. The idea was in 1919 that we need a discipline that can help us end wars. We need something that can teach us to end wars. Can actually League of Nations have been created. You've all learned that in history. So this is where international relations was established, and the idea was that we need theories that tell us how do we get rid of wars. Now, have we successfully done that? No. Because we've had many wars since the end of the Second World War. But so what has the discipline done? It has made us aware of why wars take place, how wars take place, how people get caught, how are policies made, how do we understand refugee crisis, right? How do we understand war casualties? So there are other aspects that we have explored through it, right? So now, of course, the discipline is looking at from war to terrorism to conflict, peace, even climate change is a very big issue all over the world, right? And I don't know if you're discussing that much in your classrooms, but that is international relations. Climate change is a huge topic, so much so that in Sweden, where I live, and all of the Nordic countries, Northern Europe, right? Scandinavian countries, those are the geography, remember your geography lessons. They are very strict about climate sustainability and climate change. So one of the policies that my own university has come out is to think about sustainable travel. And they're like, we add carbon when we travel by planes, right? So they're like, cut down your plane travels. It's not always possible, but as much as you can. So remember, in our country, we take so much pride in cars, right? We feel so proud. I own a Mercedes, or I want to get an Audi, or whatever fancy cars there. I'm not good at that. But Gothenburg, the city where I work and where my university is the manufacturer of which car? This is general knowledge. Come on. Very famous car company comes from the city where I live in Sweden. The city is called Gothenburg. बहुत famous car company, vehicle company है वहाँ की, हाँ. नहीं, not Audi, no. नहीं. This is fun, no. ना. हाँ. ये काम नहीं कर रहा है. Can you hear this? Better, right? हाँ. Audi नहीं है, Mercedes नहीं है, और बताइए BMW नहीं क्या?
मैं McLaren.
No. नहीं.
मैं बुगाटी.
नहीं, ट्रक भी बनाती है. वोल्वो किसने बोला? आपने बोला. See, Volvo is the right answer. Volvo is the right answer. So next you Google and find out. Lot of the Volvo cars, and Volvo is a unique company for safety vehicles, right? Safety vehicles. It's manufactured in Gothenburg. Many of my friends work there. उसकी बहुत बड़ी factory है वहाँ पे. So I'm just trying to tell you something about Sweden and sustainability, just so you know how international relations is also about sustainability. वहाँ पे, if you travel by car, it's people like look at you like, oh, why? You are kind of ashamed. Because the idea is public transport is fine. There are trams running, there are buses running. Please take the bus, take the tram, take your cycles. Do not drive. If you can avoid driving, this is what people prefer. So very often you will see the vice chancellor of the university or the head of the department cycling to work. And this is not a sight you will find in perhaps in India, where we still have cars and एक VIP आता है उसके पीछे 10 VIP cars होते हैं ना. कितना बड़ा wastage है, सोचो इसके बारे में. तुम लोग नहीं सोचोगे तो कौन सोचेगा, right? So we have to think, and I can tell you, my colleagues don't actually travel by cars. I don't own a car. We just kind of take public transport because we don't need it, and trains are connecting all over Sweden, all over Europe. In fact, if you want to go to London from Sweden, from Stockholm, you take the train. If you want to go to Finland, you take the ferry. Bus लीजिए, वहाँ से एक ferry लीजिए, boat में जाइए. People are doing that because that's the only way. The other thing that people are doing is sustainability through clothing, right? Now, it's not like people can't afford it, right? But what do? They bring the clothes together that don't fit them, that are in good condition, and these are people who are rich people who can afford to buy clothes, right? They bring it, they put it together, and you can take somebody else's clothes. This happens a lot in my own department, in my own university where I work. Senior professors, they all bring their stuff, and then you can take what you want, and they can take what they want, and everybody is wearing second hand. In our country, we would be like, oh my God, मेरे भाई का छोटा कपड़ा मुझे क्यों दे रहे हो? बोलते हैं ना, मेरी बहन का छोटा मुझे क्यों दे रहे हो? क्योंकि हम सोच नहीं पाते कि कितना वेस्टेज क्रिएट होता है उससे, right? So we have a long way to go in that, and we are doing it. ऐसा नहीं है कि इंडिया में नहीं हो रहा है. We are thinking differently, but we need to do a lot more, right? So just to give you a sense of what IR has been, that there's a lot happening in the world in terms of at the larger level decisions are made, but also day-to-day practical life, right? That is also IR. How do we manage people who are affected by conflicts? How do we help them? How do we support refugees? All of that is international relations, right? So we try to get behind all of that and find out what's happening. Now let me somebody tell me the time, please. It's so good to see people with watches, because normally it's a cell phone, right? So again, what's the time? 7:40. Okay, we're doing fine with time. Okay, as a discipline, right? When you think about history is a discipline, right? Academic disciplines, like Sir teaches chemistry, you have biology, you have social sciences, you have geography, you have civics. All of these are called disciplines, you know that, right? And as you grow older, you will do your undergrad degrees. Engineering is a discipline, right? STEM degrees they are called, right? STEM का full form क्या होता है? हाँ. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, science, technology, engineering and mathematics.
Thank you. Yes, some of you will do STEM, and thank you for that. But STEM also now says that बिना arts के आप नहीं पढ़ पाएंगे. So these are different disciplines, and they are all interconnected, right? So IR is a discipline that tells you that there is a world out there that we need to study. IR is about each one of us. This is what I've been telling you, and how we are located, situated in the international, right? आज हम यहाँ हैं, कल कहाँ होंगे, किस देश में होंगे, how might we be affected, our job prospects be affected, some of us may join the army, police, whatever we do, we are part of this big international story and how that affects us, right? Also, when you think about international relations, and many of you answered that states are important, right? Relations between states, countries के बीच में क्या हो रहा है, India, Pakistan, India, China, किसी ने यहाँ बोला था ना, आपने बोला था Canada, India relations, US relations. These are good questions. But the question also is that these countries, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? ऐसा नहीं होता कि India can do whatever it wants, right? Can go into international waters and, get rid of any ship, for example. We can't just go and bomb any country without any rules and regulations. The international system is also rule-based, right? There are rules created through international norms, through international law, through the United Nations, right? You know that. And so if you do wrong things at that larger level, you can be punished, right? After the World War II, Nazi Germany, remember what happened with the Holocaust, where a number of Jews were, 6 million Jews were exterminated through the Holocaust. And what happened after that were the trials in Nuremberg, if you read about it. There is also a film, Nuremberg, if you ever get a chance to watch that. I think it's a series as well. Nuremberg trials happened where they were tried for crimes against humanity. Even now, if dictators, they do things to harm their own population, they can be tried, right? So what I'm trying to say to you is that it's not a free world where everyone can do what they want. I mean, the international system also is a system, right? There are rules in place. But these rules can be violated, right? They can be violated. People don't have to follow the rules, and countries don't follow the rules. But ye gharon mein bhi to hota hai. You have the rules set of the house. Schools में होता है, rules होता है, right? But हम break तो करते हैं उसको. Break करते हैं तो punishment होती है, right? तो international system भी ऐसा ही है. वहाँ भी policemen हैं, वहाँ भी peacekeeping operations होते हैं. And the global policeman is the United Nations. It may not do a good job of it. There's the European Union, there's the African Union, right? So there are organizations in this rule-based order, right? So essentially, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why should we care, right? Why should we care about the world, right? Because we are no longer living in an isolated world, right? We no longer can say that here in this part of the world we are safe, and it doesn't concern us what's happening between India and Canada. Tomorrow, you may want to go to Canada as a student. It's going to affect your visa prospects. Your parents of those whose children are already in Canada are worried about how this is going to impact them, right? So the question is, how do we understand that all of that goes around? Israel, Palestine, it affected me and my students. I was supposed to, as I told you, run a course, and I can't do it anymore, right? It's affected my travels back and forth between Sweden and India, right? So in that sense, to remember that we have to care. We have to care whether we are living within democracies or not, right? If any country, for example, we've always been concerned about military rule in our own neighborhood, right? We've been concerned about the conflict in Sri Lanka. Some of the early works that I have done is also interesting. International relations ki baat kar rahe, so what did I research on? I researched on women militants in Sri Lanka. You would be too, perhaps you wouldn't know, but there was a huge conflict in Sri Lanka for many, many years, and there was the Tamil Tigers, were the militant groups fighting on behalf of the Tamils, right? I interviewed those women who had picked up the arms, guns against the state, and they fought. I went and interviewed them. I interviewed militants in Kashmir and talked to them and found out about why they were fighting, right? So this is the writing that is available. But I'm just trying to tell you that it opens so many prospects of understanding the world in a different way, right? Are you getting the sense of it? I just don't want you to think that international relations wahan ho raha hai. I know, वो बड़े-बड़े rooms में, State Department, you know, Foreign Office, South Block, Delhi में हो रहा है, यहाँ हो रहा है international relations, है ना? आप देखो हमारा international relations, मैं आपसे सीख रही हूँ, और मैं वहाँ से Sweden से आई हूँ, वैसे मैं झारखंड से हूँ. You've heard of Jharkhand, right? Dhoni State. He was my school junior, by the way, a couple of classes. We studied together in DAV in Ranchi, right? Everybody knows MS Dhoni, right? Okay, right. So I'm just trying to tell you that this is how international we are, right? The world is going that way. So why should we care? Because if we don't care, then we don't care about people. If we actually don't pay attention, why is it that the war in the Middle East is affecting us? Because we are inundated with images about people dying, people suffering. It doesn't make us happy, right? It's going to affect our relationship with that part of the world. And as humans, we need to care, right? And we are connected, right? आपके neighborhood में आजकल वो भी होता है कि neighbors को कुछ हो जाता है, हमें पता नहीं चलता, right? पता करनी चाहिए, पूछना चाहिए, हमेशा. And let me also drive in this lesson that you don't need to be a good public speaker. कभी-कभी हमें लगता है ना कि हम बहुत shy हैं, हम introvert हैं, हम बोलना नहीं चाहते. मैं वैसी नहीं थी, मैं बहुत बोलती थी क्लास में भी. लेकिन एक चीज़ होता है कि जब आप लोगों से मिलना शुरू करते हैं, बात करना शुरू करते हैं, तो it opens up a whole new space of knowledge, of understanding, of empathy. कभी-कभी होता है कि चुप भी रहना चाहिए, है ना? लेकिन बोलना भी चाहिए, पूछना चाहिए. हम कहाँ पूछते हैं अब किसी को? हम पानी के लिए नहीं पूछते, कोई सामान ले जा रहा होता है. I've been lugging my big bags around and nobody will come to say that, okay, आपको भारी लग रहा है, let me help you. It can be a girl or a boy, anybody. Nobody helps. There's something not right with the world, right? And we have to fix this. We have to think about how we can care, because we can't change everything. Gandhi said, right, you be the change you want to see in the world. This quote has been attributed to many other people. I'm not going to get into that. But the important thing is we can't fix the world. Can you and I fix the conflict in Palestine and Israel? No. But can we care about another human being right in the neighborhood? Yeah. And that's international relations as well, right? So should we care? Yes. And how should we care? First of all, if you study international relations as a discipline, it will open up new ways of understanding the world, but also understanding your own positions, your own biases, your own involvement in that, right? So very quickly, as a discipline, don't look at the slides, just these are more to guide you, and I will share it with you all. But it's basically about cultures. how cultures interact, how do we go out into the world, how are policies made. After 9/11, you know, you were probably not even born, not born, and 9/11 was a watershed event in recent times, and then all sorts of policies began to be made. How do we curb terrorism, right? Have we succeeded in that? Perhaps not, perhaps yes. How do we evaluate those policies? That is what IR teaches you, right? There is a lot happens at the foreign policy level, right? Who's our foreign minister right now? Anyone? Jai Shankar, yes, Jai Shankar, thank you, yes. And his father was a very renowned policy analyst and also, yes, who was his father? I like that. I like that. If that was a joke, I take it. Who was, go do your homework, people. Go and find out who was S. J. Shankar's father and why am I naming him, right? Thank you. Who was that? That was you, right? Okay. All right. It's fun. Maybe I should just not teach the bigger kids anymore. Okay. So yes. So thinking about the discipline, right? How it helps us connect with the world, to understand the world, and in सबके लिए theories है, different frameworks to understand, right? वो आपको अभी ज़रूरत नहीं है जानने की, but there are different ways in which you can understand. There are traditional theories of IR which tell you that, oh, states are always fighting and there'll always be war between states. States cannot exist without wars. There are theories that tell you that. There are theories that tell you if there are two democracies, they are less likely to go to war. Right? Then there are theories which tell you that none of this is useful because you guys are only talking about states, and states are not people. What about people? What about women? For example, you can have a very secure state, right? I lived in Australia for 7-8 years, right? And I worked there in 2 universities near Sydney and Melbourne. And everything was great. I'm sure you've read about Australia apart from the cricket, great country, great wildlife, good day mate, you know, everything's great, right? But the violence against women was a huge issue in that country, right? Huge issue. A lot of women were beaten up in homes. And this became such a big story that here is Australia. It's an island nation, right? It's an island country. It was securing its borders from refugees coming in, and it had all the security forces, maritime security, the Navy was strong. But then the women were not safe. Women were not safe. Aboriginal people were not safe in that country, right? So it's not as if just because the state's borders are secure, everyone is secure inside, right? And when the inside implodes rather, what happens is what we saw when the Cold War ended, right? Russia was so powerful. Remember all the stories that you've read? Russia and the United States, the big powers, right? सुना ही होगा इतना पावरफुल था यूएसएसआर बोलते थे उसको उस वक्त राइट फिर क्या हुआ सब कुछ अच्छा था न्यूक्लियर पावर था and then 89 and it imploded, it broke into so many different fragments, different states, and that can happen anywhere. It can tomorrow perhaps there are states in America, in Russia that may demand secessionism is real. It's happening in South Asia everywhere, right, in different countries. So think about that, and that's what IR actually as a discipline does. एक चीज़ और है जो बताना चाहती हूँ आपको कि IR मैंने क्या कहा अभी कि कैसे शुरुआत हुई थी कहाँ शुरुआत हुई थी World War ठीक है okay and I said that in England between the 2 world wars they created the Department of International Relations. But my question to you is go back into your own history, right? IR existed in the days of the Ramayana, in the days of the Mahabharata, right? Wasn't it Mahabharat Ramayana के किस्से क्या हैं? IR ही तो है वो नहीं है ना उसको पढ़िए आप लोग उसमें कितना इंटरस्टेट रिलेशंस होता है युद्ध के नियम होते हैं उसमें राइट उसमें जस्टिस का कॉन्सेप्ट होता है कि नहीं बताइए और क्या होता है और क्या आप उसमें से सीख सकते हैं रामायण से क्या सीखते हैं एथिक्स हाउ अ किंग शुड रूल right? Similarly, think about the life of the Buddha as well. You know, how Buddhism spreads to other parts of the world or how Jainism interacted with the world. So there's so much within our own country, right? which also teaches us about IR, right? The whole Mughal Empire period, for example, what was that? It was international relations, right? How people were walking in and out, and how the wars were fought, how enemies were created, how friendships were made, how communities, that came together, right? So IR doesn't, technically, yes, that's what I told you, that the discipline was created, a department was created, and soon, of course, all over the world it was set up. But IR is as old as human history. The idea that we should connect with the world outside. Let me tell you a little anecdote, right? In Rwanda, Rwanda is a country in which continent of the world? Geography, people. Africa, yes, yes. Rwanda is in Eastern Africa, and please get your geographies right. If you, anything that you do in life, geography should be at the heart of it. It's a very important discipline. So it's in Africa. Now, Rwanda is, unfortunately, it was in the news, and you may not know, you are far, far, far too young, but it made international news in the 1990s. Why? Has anybody heard anything about Rwanda? Why do we talk about Rwanda? Anyone? No? Okay, so in 94, there was a, yes? Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, please, again. Because of poverty, thank you, ma'am, but not really. Partly, yes, but that led to a massive genocide in 1994 between the Hutus and Tutsis. Ma'am, what do you teach here? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for telling us. Yes, actually, it was a very underdeveloped, poor country, but as ma'am said, it then led to a genocide. And genocide is a big term where one community killed the others. Massive numbers of people died, 94 genocide. It was a horrible time in history. But there is a memorial museum. The capital of Rwanda is Kigali, and I go there to teach. I have my students there, doctoral students there. And when you go to the museum, which marks this terrible massacre of human beings, you go there and you see, and in the garden outside, in the memorial garden, there's a statue of, there's a figure of somebody with a radio outside, ऐसे वो कान में लगा के radio सुन रहा है. So I was very curious that what is it doing in the Remembrance Garden? And it was because they wanted to tell the world that we were connected to the world outside. Clinton was the president of the US at that point of time. The whole world knew that this was going on, but nobody cared. Hundreds of thousands of people died. So the idea is that if we live an interconnected world, every life matters. Why did you ignore us, right? That was the question that particular memorial was asking. Yeah? So remember that. How much time do we have? We're doing fine? How are we doing, friends? Okay? Are you bored? No, ma'am. There's no pressure. Just because your principal is here, you can tell me if you are. Shall I give you a break? Stop? No? Okay, let's continue the storytelling, right? So although IR then is a discipline that is created during the World War period, but of course, we can go far back into history and know about IR, right? You can read about that. Trade relations have always existed with different civilizations, right? आपने इतिहास में पढ़ा ही होगा वो history lessons में, right? And cultural relations, exchanges, हमारे वहाँ की चीजें वहाँ जा रही हैं, लोग travel कर रहे थे, and travel has changed so much, right, over the years. So it's always been existing. We've learned about different people. But we also live in very strange times. And I remember what you said, the first thing you said, IR is about globalization, right, didn't you? And it's so interesting. What is globalization? If you use that word, but I'll not ask you because you've answered too much. Tell me somebody else. What is globalization? ये word आपने ज़रूर सुना होगा. आप बताएं. Countries trade. Okay, that's good. Tell me your name. Krishna. Nice. Thank you. Yes. Two and more countries. The interconnectedness. हाँ, आप भी बता दीजिए. Various economies, different economies around the world, different countries, right? Okay. Yes, that is globalization. But it's also cultural. I will ignore you two for now, right? Yes.
Ma'am, implementing a thing in the whole world,
Implementing what?
a thing or a policy in the whole world.
One policy in the whole world. ऐसा कौन सी policy है बताइए मुझे सोच के बताइए कोई भी which particular department of global politics do you think we can have one policy? No, you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want you to think and tell me one thing that applies globally. I didn't say you're wrong.
Okay.
Think about it, okay, and come back to me. So basically what we are trying to argue here is that all of this globalization, which should make us respect differences, right? Understand differences. Globalization is a move not just towards economic integration of the world, but also cultural, right? We understand better, we travel more, we are codependent, we are interconnected, all of those words, right? Cultural connectivity. We celebrate differences. But the more that we have become globalized, there is also fear of difference. Right? We fear difference. We are anxious. Tabhi to hum sunte hain na, there's a lot of racism in the world. I'm sure you hear about it in foreign countries. What do you hear about racism? What is racism? I'm ignoring you too for now. Yes. Yeah, but different color, race, right? Different races which are people of color. Yes. Thank you for that. Anyone else? What is racism? Yes.
Discrimination between cultures, races, and colors?
Cultures, races, and different people of different color, right? Yes, you're absolutely right. Anybody else? Yes.
Discrimination between castes.
Between castes, absolutely. That is also assessed as a kind of a racist politics, right? Which happens in our country, right? Yes.
Discrimination based on skin color.
On skin color. So caste, skin color, yes. हो गया अब जवाब ही नहीं देना है नाराज हो गए नहीं okay so they're different. Yes, there's one more hand I'd like to answer. Between countries, discrimination between countries, that is racism too. Thank you. Yes. So basically these terms have originated because the more that we have become globalized, we have also become closed in our thinking, right? डर लगता है कोई अगर अजीब सा different लगने लगे और बगल में हो तो we don't want to know about them. We're scared. And this is the anti-globalization model that we are seeing now increasingly. Remember what happened during COVID? So on the one hand, COVID, the virus, did not respect borders. It was, I mean, COVID, the virus went everywhere, right? It wouldn't stop just because you are putting barricades. You have your shutdown policies. Doesn't mean that the virus will listen to that and say, hey, there's a lockdown there. I'm not going to cross that border, right? In Australia, for example, all borders of internal states were closed. Imagine in India, if Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, they said, nahi, aap idhar se udhar nahi ja sakte. Gujarat se Maharashtra nahi ja sakte. You know, all borders were closed. Sweden was the only country that said no lockdowns, right? They had a different policy to deal with COVID. But COVID also taught us something, that on the one hand, we say that we live in this interconnected world, you know, but as soon as COVID came, we became so inward looking. All we wanted to do was protect our own, right? So people who were migrants, for example, in Western countries, they didn't get any care. The idea was all the resources are for Swedes, all the resources are for Americans, right? All the resources are for this particular class, color, creed, all of that came into the picture, right? So it showed us a very different side of human beings, right? That when trouble strikes, we don't think of a globalized world. We think increasingly we become inward looking. We only think of ourselves and our people, right? And only that matters. How do we become like that? Isn't that interesting? How do we just think about ourselves and we don't think of humanity somewhere else? I mean, I know that all of us know that black and brown people are discriminated in the West, right? Now, this is something that you've all heard of, right? Yes, I'm sure you know that it's not easy for a black person in America or in England. I'm sure you know of Indians who are treated poorly abroad, right? big stories. I myself have so many stories. But how do we treat people in our own country? We never reflect on that. Skin color, caste, other kinds of differences, religious differences. How do we treat people? That is also something that we ought to be thinking about. Many of my friends from Africa travel to India, and it's not easy for them. If my friend is white, European, it's easy to navigate because everybody wants to help them. If it is a black African friend traveling through India, it's very, very difficult. Do you know, I mean, can you imagine how hard it will be? We just don't need to go that far. In our countries, doesn't skin color still matter? Don't we discriminate based on that? Don't we say, oh, are you fair? Are you darker skinned? Are you fair skinned? I mean, we do see those kinds of conversations, right? And we need to question that. We need to understand that, right? So think about international relations in that sense that we are talking about a globalized world, but we are also at the same time becoming more inward looking, more xenophobic. That's a big word, but it means the fear of the foreigner, the fear of somebody who's different, right? And it's happening everywhere. More that people are coming into contact with cultures, and you would think that that's a great idea, isn't it? But it's not, because people are afraid. Okay, so traditional IR, and there is a traditional IR and there is a non-traditional IR. Traditional IR approaches tell you that the world is made of states, that all of you also alluded to. There are states, there is the international system, and a rule-based order, there's the UN, there's foreign policy, so we study all of that, right? There's an external enemy, security, all of that is traditional. And then there is the non-traditional, critical IR, as we call it, in which my own work, my own research, my own values are situated. I call myself a critical IR scholar because for me the question is, knowledge is not just knowledge because we want to study something as it is, right? Why do we need knowledge? To change something, right? We want that knowledge so that something else emerges out of the world. How can we fix it, right? So I work, for example, on gender. I work on colonial histories and racism. Why? Because I think these are terrible things that happen. Gender discrimination happens. Education, for example, in our own country, look at how girls and boys education. This is so great to see that we have a mixed group here. But there are, so many spaces where you don't see girls, right? How does that change? It's changing. But how can we change that further, right? So that is also thinking about non-traditional IR. And so non-traditional IR is the IR that will point out to you and say that the Auckland Star, that report is very problematic. If it's a mainstream person, they will not be able to see that difference, right? But if it's a critical person, they'll say, oh, but hey, who is the porter? Why is Tenzing Norgay's name not there, right? Think about all these things as we go along, right? Any questions? No questions? We'll come back. Yes, yes. I will have some time. I'm just trying to wrap up so we can go there, but yes, please.
What skills are necessary in the international relation fields?
What skills are necessary to get into the field?
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
Now that's a good question. It's a kind of a question that will help everyone. So can you wait for the answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, let me just wrap up the lecture a little bit and then we have a conversation, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Tell me your name.
Anvi Soni.
Anvi.
Yes, ma'am.
Anvi, okay. I'll come back to you, Anvi. I'm making a note. How much more time? Half an hour? Half an hour, yeah. So let me just, give me another 15 minutes. Note your questions, all of you, so we can come back because Anvi's question is so important. In the end, I want to talk about IR as a field, and if you are thinking of that direction, if you want to study, if you want to do something in IR, if you are thinking of projects, social science projects, then we'll talk about that. So stay with your questions. Make a note of it. Ki ye poochna hai, huh? So let me just take you through other things that I want to share. Now, IR is a big field of study, but it also has many sub-fields, right? Uske andar bhi specializations hote hain, right? Like engineering, you have mechanical, you have electronic, right? What else do you have? aerospace, software, yeah, there's so many kinds of engineering. Even in IR, you have different fields of inquiry, right? So political economy. Without economy, you cannot understand IR. And if you want to become just an economist and study IR from that perspective, like, does anybody remember a famous Nobel laureate or two who are economists from India? Yes, ma'am. Amartya Sen, yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, yes. And recently also there was another Indian gentleman who got the Nobel Prize in the last few years for economics, right? So I will leave that homework for you to find out. But Indians tend to do well. I mean, our scholars have done brilliantly in the field of international economics. Economics is a very important field of inquiry. So global political economy. And after that, we also have international political theory, right? Because there are a lot of theorists. What do theorists do? Yeah, it's a big word, you know, theory, oh my God, like who theorizes? But theory is not so scary. It's for people who are interested in bigger frameworks, right? Which can help us understand you know, what is happening in the world, right? It's not, it's at the macro level, you develop ideas that help you understand something that goes on everywhere. So that question that you said, that one particular thing through which the world, one particular rule or something that you said which connects the world, right? There. Human rights, for example, think about that. That is a good answer. Every country needs to respect human rights. Right? So you were right. I was just trying to ask you to think about something that connects the world, right? So, theory, international political theory, international ethics, the question of ethics, good behavior. Should states behave properly? Should states have ethics? Of course. But if you read conventional, traditional IR, they'll tell you states don't have morals and ethics. Why should states behave in a good way? States go to wars. If they had any morals or ethics, they wouldn't go to war, right? But they do go to war, right? So, but the question is, should there be ethics? Of course, and there are international ethics. So how do we study that? And what are the rights and duties of everyone as citizens? When we are discriminated against, we are all citizens of the country, but some are better than the others. Why? Which is why we have so many secessionist movements, or people are unhappy. We have conflict within states as well, right? So think about that. International organizations like the European Union, like the United Nations, right? These are organizations at the bigger level. If you just want to study how they came into being, how they function, how, you know, how they interact with the world, it tells you, it's a completely different field of inquiry, right? How are UN policies made? UN is a huge organization. Some of you, I hope, and I sincerely pray that some of you will work within the UN system. It's a fantastic system that requires new minds and new people, and it's not so hard to get into the UN. We have this idea that, oh my God, you know, there are people from my hometown, home state, all of them working with UNICEF, UNDP, UNHCR. These are the agencies of the UN that work within humanitarian fields. And you can work in that. If you study IR, for example, you can get into those fields as well, right? And then there is another subfield called feminist international relations. So don't be afraid of that. Feminism is a big word, but it basically means what is the gender segregation that is happening in the world, right? Which states are powerful, that behave like powerful, rich, you know, men, patriarchal men, right? There are states that we used to say that America is a bully, right? For a long time. Today we say Russia is a bully. So how is the international system gendered, right? How do we understand the position of women, for example? I gave you an example that you can have the state as very secure, but women may not be secure. Are girls getting education that they should? There is so much violence against women that is reported. How do we deal with that, right? So that also is a field that we study. So feminist IR people would say, we don't care about states. States exist, but what about rights for women and other sections of society, right? Okay, and there's one other thing that I want you to take away is that there is a discipline which is called international relations, right? And we are talking about the discipline, its origins, where it lies. So that's international relations. But what does international relations study? International relations, right? Which is the practical aspects of the world, right? So we say that IR with the big capital letters is the discipline of IR. And what does it study? International relations outside the practical world, right? So very often you will see that IR and studies IR in small. So in small is what is the world outside, right? The discipline is a scholarly way to interpret international relations, right? So just to remember that practices in the real world, and of course they are interrelated, right? I'm going to skip some of this. Look at how some of these, ways in which IR can be studied. Humor, for example, right? I don't know if you had, some of you may be artists, right? You can study IR through art. You can study IR through poetry, through story writing, through novel writing. You can do so many things. So this is a cartoon, of course, which is talking about the war in Iraq, where they were looking for weapons of mass destruction, but even after the war, they kept looking for weapons of mass destruction and they couldn't find it, right? The whole idea of going to the war was because of this, but obviously they couldn't find it. So it's a critique of Western powers, and especially America, which orchestrated this war against Iraq based on the idea that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. So through that. You can also study IR through Twitter, for example, social media. If you're interested in it, that gives you a lot of information, right? So these are 2 tweets of Trump, right? It's not very clear here, but I'm sure they'll circulate the PowerPoint later. But it's when Trump was tweeting, then at one point of time, Twitter just sanctioned him and did not allow him to be on Twitter, right? So sometimes even these political leaders can get into a whole IR debate on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram, whatever that be, right? So that also is international relations happening right there. I mean, today, think about the world that we live in. You can directly write to your leaders and prime minister, tag them on Twitter. We couldn't have imagined this during our times, that we would write probably a letter, dear Mr. Prime Minister, could you, send me, my parents don't listen to me, could you please advise them to, treat me properly? I'm sure some people wrote those kinds of letters, but that was a different era. Now we can just tag. And they respond sometimes, they are forced to respond because politics is also about performance, right? They have to please the public. They have to be seen doing good to the public. If they lose that, so why do you think so much of the political campaign is about posters and about speeches and about social media performance, right? Election is a carnival in this country, right? Everywhere posters. I was traveling in Jaipur before the Rajasthan elections, and oh my God, everywhere posters. And I sometimes think, what a waste of resources in this country. Nowhere in the world that I have been to, and elections have been held in every country. Australia has federal elections every 3 years. Ireland had elections. UK has elections. None of them have this kind of a poster frenzy, this performance. They don't spend that much, and you could have the opposition candidate just walk into your university and talk to you, or the prime minister's taking the train. I mean, these things were common. We are, of course, far from that in our own country, but perhaps some of you who might join politics later will bring in this culture of real commoner doing something good for the people, right? Why does it have to be that politicians are special and they are the super duper people? Why? They are elected to govern us, to make policies for us, but they enjoy power because of us. We elect them. They don't have power on their own. The power lies with the people, right? If we don't elect them, they're not there. But they forget that, right? Most of them do. So think about it, how we are connecting. That is also international relations, is how we are connecting. You can write a tweet to Obama if you like, or to Rishi Sunak, or to anybody that you fancy if you're on Twitter, right? That's how interconnected we are in these times, right? This is another exchange between Trump and the North Korean dictator in a way about the nuclear weapons, and how how they talked about who has bigger nuclear weapons and who can destroy the world more. So you can access some of these information through social media. So then the question for us is, what is the purpose of this discipline, right? What does it do? All of that I've said, that it helps us live the international. Everything else you already know, right? It helps us understand the world better. It helps us understand so many issues better. But above all, it helps us understand that we are all part of the big international story, right? We are in the thick of it. We are not here sitting in this part of the world not connected with what is happening in Gaza or in Israel or in America right now. It's going to affect us. This interconnection is what makes IR very much part of our lives. So as I said, next time, go to the mall. Whatever you buy has a label. Try and think about that. Shoes have a label. We all love labels, right? We love these brands, right? A lot of people are obsessed with it. Think about it. All the cars that you talked about, Volvo, for example, it's still, I imagine people drive that in India, right? Do they drive that here? Imagine it's connecting you to Gothenburg, a city in Sweden, where it originates. So think about these kinds of interconnections. But how it's not just about the world of states, but about people and how people share cultural spaces and spaces together. So it's about each one of us and how we are situated as students, as refugees. I teach, for example, in Sweden, or when I go to Kigali in Rwanda, I teach a lot of people who are genocide survivors, whose family were killed, or there are Afghan refugees in my classroom. There are some very interesting stories they tell you about. I had a student in my BA who had walked from Afghanistan he was a Hazara, and he had walked to minorities in Afghanistan persecuted. He had walked all the way from Afghanistan via Middle East to Turkey, and then on foot, leaving his family there, and then come to Sweden as a refugee. It was an incredible story. He was my student because the state took him as a refugee, and then as a refugee you have rights to get education. But it was such a story, and I asked him, this was during Ramzan, that, and he was fasting, but obviously this is Sweden. It's not like there is food on the table, and it is dark sometimes in winter, very dark in Sweden. There's no sun for 2-3 months. And he said, I miss Ramadan in my own country. I miss my people. Yes, I have everything here. I have good life. I am safe. I'm protected. But it's not my people and my country. So that longing for the country was very much there, which reminds me of the film Kabuliwala. It's a story by Rabindranath Tagore, which was, you know it. Did you read it? Or watched it? You've heard it. Yeah, so there is also an old film, but I'm sure you can read the story in many forms. It's a beautiful story. That Afghani lived in India, right? And then he was jailed, and but he longs for his country, Kabul, right? So these kinds of longings that we have. When I'm in Sweden, for example, I'm always thinking, okay, no sun for 3 months, let me get out of here, let me go see my family in India. This is always there. You move out of here to maybe to Pune or Nagpur or Bangalore, wherever you go, Delhi, you'll be like, oh, can I go back home sometimes, right? So all of us have a concept of home, right? So that also makes us international in that sense. So as journalists, citizens, consumers, everything that I've listed here, as householders, we're all international in that sense. And finally, I want to talk, oh dear, yeah. And so among everything that IR does in terms of telling us about how societies have developed, how those interconnections have been framed, how people's lives are shaped, how our different identities intersect, right? We have religious identity, national identities, different kinds of, we are people of color, we are brown, black, Indian, race identities. How do we deal with that, right? Which one is important? We are men, we are women, women, we are even trans people. How does that intersect, right, at different points of time? But above all, the last thing that I want to tell you is that it helps us become better and caring global citizens. So it's not like we turn our eyes to everything that's happening on the world outside and say, "Ye mujhe farak nahi padta." So we realize that we do it to our neighbors and in the societies that we live in, but actually we should say farak padta hai, because this is our world. We are not just Indians, we are global citizens. We have a stake in the world. Why do you think India invested so much in the G20 summit? Because we want to be part of the story of the world, right? Our economies are interconnected. We can't say that this is just, our part of the world. We won't have anything to do with. We care that our relations with Canada is bad at the moment, or US. We want to improve, right? We want to get better. We care about the world. So it helps us become that. And also your own perspective also will develop if you study the discipline, or even if you don't study it, if you start thinking about the international, you start thinking about analyzing things differently. You read news, for example, right? Which Indian media tells you this is what is happening in Gaza. But I hope that after this lecture, or even otherwise, you're interested in whatever topic that be. Maybe some of you are climate change. Greta Thunberg, she is Swede, right? She's doing a lot for climate change. If you are like her, that is your area of interest. Whatever areas that you will have, you will read more. You will find out more. You will research more. And you will ask yourself the question that what the media has told me, is that the only story, or is there something else I should know, right? After the Middle East conflict happened, a lot of people started reading about the conflict, its history. Many people didn't know why Israel and Palestine, such a brutal conflict was going on. But many people read these histories and found out. And in terms of career, right, what will you actually, I'll come to your skills question in a bit, but what kind of careers can you have if you study international relations as a discipline? So policy analysts, there's a lot of scope to analyze policies. You work in think tanks. You can become diplomats. In India, there is the civil service exam to become diplomats, but that's not the only way to get into foreign policy space. You can do that in many other ways. There are different levels of recruitment. You can be an analyst. You can be, a journalist. So there are different ways in which you can work for the foreign ministry, foreign space. You can work in the development sector, right? And I told you there are different agencies of the UN, international organizations like Red Cross, Transparency. There's so many other organizations, Doctors Without Frontiers. They all recruit people for doing different things, and you can all have a career there. You can become a journalist who's trained in international relations, and you'll be, reporting about, another part of the world, trade relations, war, whatever that be. There are war reporters who travel to different parts of the world. They take great risks, and they do that. And you can work in think tanks. You can become a professor like me and give lectures. So there's lots of things that you can actually do. And this is the question that I had for you in the end, which I will perhaps we can think about it for the lack of time, but think about any issue, right? I've listed some for you. Terrorism, violence against women and girls, war in Ukraine, Israel-Hamas conflict, dictatorships, authoritarian governments, COVID-19, migrants and refugees. Now, all of these are familiar problems to all of you, right? So if we have to think about creative solutions, right? How would you think about solutions? We'll come to that in a minute, but let me take some questions here, and I want to now come to your Anvi, right? Okay. So your question was, what skills do we need? So skills in international relations, to study international relations, is firstly, what you need is to read a lot. And this is not just specific to IR. If you want to become a historian, if you want to do anything in the social sciences, and please correct me, those who teach science subjects, you still need to update knowledge in sciences as well, in physics, chemistry, biology, because there's new research coming out. So reading is absolutely critical. That habit, if you can, I still have that. I wake up in the morning, I write because that's my writing time. But before I crash, I need to read something. I'm not able to read as much as I would like to, but a few pages every day. I make a note, okay, these are the list of books I need to read. Read it. You can read it on your digital, whatever you read. I can't do that. I like hard copies. But print out or have a book and read. So read as much as you can. The only thing that helped me in my life, and I come from a small town called Ranchi. I think I told you, I can do a quiz on that, right? And Ranchi, kaun se state ka capital hai? Thank you. Brilliant. So, you know, it was a small town, and I went to a brilliant school like your school here. It was exactly like this. And to a lesser extent, actually not as engaged with the world. I mean, look at the fabulous speakers that you've had who've come for the last. We didn't have those things in our times, but it was a good school. It was an ICSE school. And it was so brilliant because the only thing that helped us survive was reading. We had a library, and we were allowed to borrow books and read because remember, there was no social media, no television those days, at least not television of the kind that we see now. So all we had was books. And that will see you in good stead. So reading, writing. And writing is a skill that you have to develop. I know that a lot of people now, they're like, because you have exams sometimes on digital, or you don't practice handwriting, but writing little bit every day. It could be just your thoughts. If you have a diary, just write. You know, after so many years, when you are in my age, or even earlier than that probably, you will look back at those diaries and you'll be like, okay, this is how I have evolved as a person. This is how my ideas grew. So write about anything. It could be about your feelings for that day, or what you think about your friend, your teacher, somebody you met. It could be about the crowd outside, the bazaar, the noise. It could be anything. A theme. I used to do that, a theme. So theme could be anything. Family or dreams or school or whatever. You want to complain, make the diary your friend. It can be your friend. So write little bit, a paragraph or two. So these two skills, reading and writing, are essential. I wouldn't say that everyone needs to be a great public speaker. Public speaking doesn't come to everyone, but be a people's person. And by that I mean that you don't have to stand on the stage and speak. And even if you do, you should never be frightened. Why? Because जब आप वहाँ खड़े होते हो ना, वो space ऐसा होता है जहाँ पे आपको nervous नहीं feel करना चाहिए, because you should realize that you are standing there, you have something to communicate, and other people are receiving something from you. So you shouldn't think that आप वहाँ कुछ कह ही नहीं सकते. Nobody in the world, on any stage, at any time of space and life, has the answers to everything. Whatever you have, you share. And you have to develop a kind of thick skin which says that I will not be affected by how people judge me. This is, in principle, I followed this, right? All my life I followed this. I don't care. I had a terrible accent, right? I went to India, Indian schools, then I landed up in England. I developed a kind of a little English accent. Then I moved to Australia. I picked up Australian accent. And I had lived in Singapore. वहाँ पे Singlish चलती है, वहाँ का accent अजीब होता है. तो आप जितना travel करते हो, आप उतनी तरह की अंग्रेजी बोलते हो, right? And people used to laugh at me, my students, and I used to tell them, they used to say, oh, you speak so fast, Swati. By the way, nobody calls you ma'am and professor. Professor, yes, in American universities, but it's all Swati. They address you by the first name. That's their culture there. They call their teachers by the name. But they'll be like, oh, we can't follow you. I'm like, you will learn to listen, because this is how I speak, so train your ears to listen to me. And they had to do that. So this confidence comes from the fact that you have to tell yourself that somebody else does not have the power over you to make you feel the way you do. बाकी चीज़ें होती रहती है. Practice से आपको वो confidence आ जाएगा. So the answer to reading, writing, reflecting, and communicating with the world, I think these 4 things are important. बात करो सबसे, right? Any human being, some uncle comes home, auntie comes home, somebody comes to clean, cook your food, whatever that be, talk to your parents, talk to your siblings. If you don't talk, if you're constantly on your phones and your digital things, limit your digital time. It's very strictly done my colleagues do it with their children. They're like, no, you have 1 hour per day or half an hour for your things, otherwise go talk to your friends. We are not doing a good job of that, right? Because हमें लगता है कि अरे बात क्या करना है, टीवी देख लो, फोन है, कुछ और कर लो, वीडियो गेम्स खेल लो, right? सब करते हैं हम, बात नहीं करते. So talking also helps, right? Thank you for that, but we'll come back to more, but let me take some questions anyway. Yes. Yeah, just raise your hand and I'll come back to you next. I've seen you. Huh.
Ma'am, as in starting you tell that for international relations, peace is important. So what a common person or a country can do to make the international relation peaceful and all?
First of all, thank you for that. Again, tell me your name. Manas, yeah. Manas, thank you for that. How is peace important and how can common people bring peace or think about peace? And I think we are going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow, right? About peace, right? We'll talk a little bit. So, but I just want to tell you, पहले तो ये desire होनी चाहिए peace की, है ना? कि we should want peace because war doesn't, नहीं, I'll do it, don't worry. I don't need it actually right now. I'll just finish this and have, but thank you. So peace should be something that is desirable, right? Most of us think that, oh, war is cool, you know, country should go to war. That has become our first port of call, that war is inevitable, war is important, right? Desire for peace is so important. Now the Mahabharata, for example, I've been reading it because I'm writing a research paper. Many people think it is a war text. It teaches us that, you know, when adharma fights adharma, there's a war happens and so on and so forth, right? But actually, the Mahabharata is the story of peace and where peace failed. Krishna tries his best to tell people that if you inflict this war on your own people, this will be the destruction. There was not a single character in the Mahabharata who was not aware that the war was going to be a disaster. Dhritarashtra would lose his sons, they would lose their cousins, Kunti would lose her children. I mean, everybody knew the consequences of it. And till the end, Krishna says, Paanch gaon de do, right? You've heard this. I mean, the more popular versions of Mahabharata. But nobody was listening. And so he says that this is something that you are inflicting on yourself. So it's a story of why peace failed. But that is a book about peace. It is not about war for me, right? But we will talk more. The desire for peace and to work for peace is to do one thing, only one thing I would say, which is to understand that we can't all be similar. राइट कोई हमारी तरह सोचे, हमारी तरह बोले, हमारे तरह पहने, हमें बहुत अच्छा लगता है कि अच्छा उससे तो हम बात कर सकते हैं, हम सबको अपने जैसा बनाना चाहते हैं. क्यों? अरे वो डिफरेंट है, वो डिफरेंट सोचता है, उसकी वो सोचती है, उसका देश अलग है, उसकी सोच अलग है. उस डिफरेंस को हम रिस्पेक्ट क्यों नहीं करते? हमें क्यों लगता है कि हम जो हैं, the world is better because we are different, right? But we want to mitigate that and we want to say, नहीं, हमारी सोच सबसे अच्छी है, हमारी तरह सोचो, हमारी तरह बनो. ये जब तक हम करते रहेंगे, we will continuously fight and destroy each other. So respecting difference is absolutely critical. But we'll come back to it more, Manas. Thank you. Anybody else with questions? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, there.
Ma'am, why all countries fight with each other? Why didn't they live peacefully and friendly?
Okay, good questions. Why do countries go to war? If I was a traditional IR person, I would tell you that countries go to war because it's a natural state of being. Countries are operating in, although it's a rule-based order, but there's an anarchical system. Because there is a world policeman, but nobody is telling them to not go to war, right? Countries go to war because there is a national interest. And that interest is defined by the fact that if they go to go to war, they maximize their power, right? So the idea that if I attack another country, I will acquire territory, I will acquire People are unhappy, they pick up arms, they are not happy with the state of governance in the world. People are not happy with how they're being ill-treated, how they're being discriminated. So a lot of people take to violence as well. So it's a very complex answer. How can we prevent wars in that sense? By making people's lives better, by not discriminating. If we make the world a little bit more livable, then perhaps everyone will not be forced to take up arms, right? We have next door to you in Chhattisgarh, also parts of MP, we've had, and my own home state of Jharkhand and Orissa, we had the Naxal insurgency for so long, right? Maoists, the Naxals, I'm sure you've read the stories about how they have been engaging. Why? Because obviously there is some disconnect with the state, right? So the state may not have done everything right. So there are different complex reasons why they go to war. The question is, how is that war preventable? What can we do to prevent that war? And we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thank you.
As we all know that United Nations has a great power, so why it do not take preventive measures to stop the war between the countries?
Yeah, okay, great question. Why doesn't the UN intervene? Now, UN was created in which year? Thank you, good history students, well done, 1945, after the Second World War. Now, the UN reflects the reality of 1945 better. तो उस समय की reality क्या थी? Germany had been defeated, France, UK, US were the big powers. China entered, right, later, 49, after the Communist Revolution. So if you look at the most powerful organ of the UN is the Security Council, dominated by P5 countries, right, Russia. So those countries are not representing the part of the world from where we all come, right? The idea, I mean, imagine India is such a big stakeholder. Why is India not part of Security Council? Africa mein war hota hai. There's not a single African country in the Security Council. So I would tell you that the UN agencies have done a lot of good humanitarian work, but UN has not been able to deal with wars, including the war in Gaza right now between Israel and Hamas, is because, it's not because they lack will, it's just how they are still dominated by a Cold War, as end of Second World War logic. They have not reformed themselves enough. There is not enough resolution, right? Willpower. For example, think about veto power. UN has veto power. China says something, America vetoes that. Somebody says something, vetoes that. So it reflects a different reality. You have to reform, and UN hasn't done that. Moreover, if you really think about it, the UN doesn't have power to make decisions on behalf of countries. Eventually, it is to the countries to do certain things, right? The UN acts as the moral guardian. It can tell people, don't make war, but it cannot stop you. That has to come where there is a lot of world leaders coming together and saying that this war will be detrimental, right? So we'll talk about war and peace tomorrow. Any other questions? Quick questions? Yes.
Ma'am, what is the difference between a partnership and an ally in international politics?
Partnership and?
Being an ally.
Allies. Did I get that right? Partnership and allies.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So partners can also be allies, right? But allies have a similar kind of ideology. Allies आप तभी बनते हैं जब आपकी विचारों में एक समानता है, right? आप सोच सकते हैं कि there is something in common, right? Then you become allies. But partnerships can be on a number of fronts. You can just be you have an economic partnership, trade partnership, but it may not mean that you're culturally equivalent, right? Culturally you think similar things, right? So partnership is more strategic, more structured. Allyship is more like extending your arm and finding out, if there are common values. I would say loosely that could explain it, but it depends on the context. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Now we are tired, right? Okay. I think we should close this here, right? Okay, so I think I will see you tomorrow. But thank you all. You've been very, very brave, and you know how to get in touch with me. It's been so much joy, so much pleasure to meet you, and I have learned so much. I was not half as clever as you are at your age, I can tell you. इतना smart अगर मैं होती तो पता नहीं क्या कर लेती. यहाँ पे आपको भाषण दे रही हूँ. But you guys are great. Thank you all for listening to me. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your invaluable insight on international relations. And not only this, you have guided the student in such a beautiful way, and the vibe of the room has totally changed. Am I right, students? Yes. So definitely it will be fruitful for you too. But it is not the end. Ma'am will be with us tomorrow once again. So tomorrow our session will be on peace and development. So we are waiting for it, ma'am, eagerly, very eagerly. So this is the end of the session, and for today we wrap up here, and tomorrow is waiting once again for you. Some more learning sessions will be there definitely. So have a great night and take rest.